and welcome to the next episode of the Powerless Podcast. In this episode, I talked to Desmond, who is the vocalist and lyricist of the band Career Day from New York. It's an emo punk band that is a very interesting band. Takes a lot of inspiration musically from bands like Taking Back Sunday, Blink-182. We talk a bit about Blink-182 and kind of get into the weeds of kind of our opinions on the various areas of the band. And yet at the same time, this band is very interesting, especially in the conception of this podcast, that the lyrics are very much all about anti-imperialism, critiquing the U.S. government, critiquing racism, critiquing all these different social and political aspects that we talk about that not a lot of the emo bands that are more talking about personal relationships or things of that nature dive into. One of their biggest influences would be bands like Taking Back Sunday or things from that kind of mid-2000s emo era, as well as some other more modern ones that we get into as well. Dive into a lot of the topics from the record. If you haven't listened to it yet, the record from the band Where We've Always Been, from, again, the band Career Day, is absolutely fantastic. Definitely check it out, whether you're a fan of emo pop punk music in that realm, or you're into these sort of topics that we're talking about in the vein of either socialism, anti-imperialism, all these different things. It was an absolutely fantastic conversation with Desmond. We went pretty long, so I'm going to keep this intro pretty short, but I just really hope you guys check out the whole thing. We dive into a lot of fun things, from different music topics to also all these different situations that influence this record. Talk about Desmond's personal life experience when it comes to being Filipino American, and talking about some of the different advocacy things he's done in that realm, his trips to the Philippines, all these different things that I just think are really interesting and not something a lot of people talk about in music-based podcasts. So I really appreciate Desmond coming on and doing this. Just as a reminder, before we get into the episode, you can reach me on all social media at The Powerless Pod. Email me at thepowerlesspod@gmail.com. We have a couple of pretty cool guests coming up in the next few weeks. So just make sure to go to all those things, subscribe where you listen to podcasts, whether it's YouTube or podcast platforms. Reach out to me. I love to hear from people. I've been getting some cool messages from people I've never talked to before about how they've kind of stumbled upon the podcast and really enjoy it. So again, reach me on all those things. Make sure to check out Career Day at Career Day NY on social media. And before we get into the episode, I'm just going to plug the band Whole Heart, metalcore band from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Put out my favorite EP, Dreams That Die With You, in 2022. They do have a new song coming out very soon that I haven't gotten a chance to listen to yet, but I'm really stoked to check it out. So make sure to look at Whole Heart on all social media, wholeheart_US, I believe on Instagram. Check them out on YouTube. Check them out on all streaming platforms. I'll play a clip from Whole Heart right before this conversation with Desmond hits, and then we'll get into the conversation with Desmond from Career Day. Thanks so much. Lost in this battered frame, fight, break this lifeless home. That's what there's lessen the grip that weighs me down, which is what you call hell. Detach me from myself. Powerless Podcast with Desmond from Career Day, New York City-based band, emo, punk rock, pop punk, whatever you want to call it, band from the New York City area. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing better than I was for the previous 8 hours after having to wake up to move my car for one of the many bureaucratic hellscape nightmares of New York City. I had to move my car for alternate side parking. And then
sounds awful.
then the very important work of emails and Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. Very, very, very thrilling. That's my passion, really. I do the music for the money. But that's the passion, really.
That's what punk rock is.
All about, baby.
Is all about alternate parking and Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. Probably more than people realize, actually, when it comes to touring, at least, and keeping books, right?
It's all about that VLOOKUP, baby.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks so much for coming on. You and I got in contact basically just through social media when I shared a few things, and kind of noticed that this would be a great conversation for us to have because your band, I think, is unique in a way of the genre that you're in and also the topics that you cover. And what I mean by that is, I'm a big fan of a lot of the emo pop punk bands, especially of the mid 2000s, whether it was Taking Back Sunday or not so much now. But one of the bands that got me started in writing my own music as just like an amateur musician was Brand New, which I don't listen to much anymore. We won't get into all that, but
Ooh,
but the point being, like, it's music that's very near and dear to my heart, but also it's not the sort of genre space that a lot of times you see a band talking about the issues that your band very explicitly in your lyrics, at least from the latest album, talks about, right? Which I thought was a really cool thing. Actually, before we even started recording this, obviously, the second you got in contact with me, I checked out the record, and I sent it to one of my friends that's also very politically engaged and loves emo music, and he was like, "I so needed this. This is awesome. Like,
hell
this is
yeah,
fantastic."
brother,
He's
let's
he's a
go.
yeah, he's a big Taking Back Sunday fan and big into politics, and so I was like, "Here's this band. He cited Taking Back Sunday as one of their big influences, and they also talk about anti-imperialism and police brutality." And he was like, "Oh, I'm so in." So um,
Fuck yeah.
all that being said here, to kind of get started here, I'd like to talk obviously about the latest record your band has put out, and the lyrical content from any of the number of songs that are on a lot of these issues. Also talk about what got you started in music. I also know that you are a part of at least one organization I could find from Instagram, the Northeastern Coalition to Advance Genuine Democracy in the Philippines. So you're obviously a bit into activism as well. So,
For
we'll,
sure.
we'll kind of get into all those things as they come about in the conversation. But to start, I would really, really love to talk about the record that you guys put out in 2022, Where We've Always Been. First of all, from a music standpoint, great record. I think it very much sounds like the influences you all state you have from those kind of classic emo pop punk um, backgrounds. But again, like I said, the interesting thing about it is the lyrics are so explicitly about a lot of social and political issues. I know from at least your biography that you have on Spotify, you talk about that a lot of these things come from both your personal activism as the lead singer, and I'm guessing the primary vocal or lyricist, I should say, of the band. Um, your experiences as being a Filipino American, and also the activism that you do. But let's just kind of get into. I'm sure there's a lot to talk about for the influences lyrically and musically for this record. Um, but to start off, just in general, and then we can maybe get into a couple of the specific songs. What were some of the big, whether it was events, whether it was things you read, from a political activist standpoint, whatever else? What were some of the big influences you had lyrically for this record? Because as I said earlier, it's a very, politically driven record, especially for the genre that you play in.
For sure. So lyrically, I mean, like, as far as, it's hard to think of perhaps flash points as much as, or like specific, I guess, moments as much as the. So I was working when, I guess, a flashpoint, and it's a bit, it comes off a bit cliche, but you know, 2016, a little bit before that too, just the ginning up of just our constant social media interaction, uh, being nothing but the worst of people that you seemingly thought were fucking normal, quote
Yeah.
unquote normal people that you went to high school with, that, like, to call them apolitical almost comes off more political than any of their general ongoings were. But watching people that I knew kind of seeing both on social media and in real life, people that I, had grown up with. I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up on Long Island, on the border of Queens and Long Island, and watching the changes that I saw, happen in people. This rise of, like, coded kind of white national, like a mix of nationalism, ethno nationalism, that was just kind of rising, and people that you used to just be able to, I don't know, talk, used to talk hockey with, and that was
Right.
just fine. Like that was it. We talked about Always Sunny or something like that. Like
Yeah.
and that was, we kept it moving, and then out of nowhere they're starting to complain about how they're getting a raw deal in life, and how what's happened to our country and all this just weird. It's like you've lived in a house and you got a job from your dad. What are you talking about? What have
Yeah.
you not gotten? I'm not sure. So seeing that general slide mixed with how frustrating it was when the election happened, I was already kind of starting to dip my toes into just issues, I guess. Just try, but really was just getting in social media arguments. So in a way, becoming part of the problem. And when the
Right.
election happened, or leading up to the election, I had signed up for a community organizing fellowship at the American Civil Liberties Union of New York. They're like state based branch, and so I started doing like a community organizing fellowship there while. And then eventually started working at the ACLU of New York in their Nassau County, Long Island office. And so as that was going on, like that's 2016, and then I get officially hired in 2017. Um, it was kind of jarring seeing the that like my work and my passions being focused on, I guess, what you just loosely call like cause work, advocacy, I guess, and trying to involve myself in some sort of something that felt active and transformative, and it was frustrating. When I would go from um, working a shift where I was like in charge of our intake line, and people that are dealing with all sorts of issues regarding uh, police brutality, racial policing, discrimination, harassment of undocumented workers and individuals, and then going from I end a day there, and then if I go to a show of bands that are playing pop punk emo music, my favorite sound of music, the it felt like I was visiting a place that was like an infomercial for like a world that doesn't exist. These
Right.
songs feel like they feel like songs that exist in a fictional world, like a songs
Hmm.
that I would hear in a movie that can't be drawn from the world that I am, clearly the world that's going on, the world that I'm like doing my best to bring myself into, and that dissonance was something that, because we put out like a demo in 2018, and kind of just two songs, and it really was just a demo, just to write a couple songs with some friends and put it out. And it was one of those things where like, all right, well, this isn't really gonna work as a band, just everyone's kind of in different places and whatnot. But I was like, you know what, let me get back into this, but let me finish working, because I was working for the ACLU, but I was working part time, so I had to fill my time with event security and driving for Lyft. So I was just completely exhausting myself,
Yeah.
mentally,
Yeah.
psychologically, physically, and and I was like, but let me find some people to write with, and when I come back though, it's I want to posit all the things that I think are not being said in spaces where frankly there's a lot of privilege in them, which is not a bad thing. You can use your privilege for good, but there's just a lot of idle
Right.
privilege in the house. And considering how online the scene is and genre is, I know y'all see what's going on in the world and you're not engaging in it. That's fine. I mean, it sucks, but if you're not going to engage in it, me yelling at you, just from the sidelines to engage in it isn't going to do anything. But I'll write some songs and get to it. And weirdly, we'd put out an EP during the pandemic that was three songs that we wrote just before the pandemic, in the late 2019. just to have, you know, um, you find your chemistry with a new group of people, and put out songs, and those aren't necessarily political songs, but those they're definitely life weary songs,
Right.
and but the right before like February 2020, I think it was, um we and so it's 2020, we're already in the election year, and everything's about the election, because this is a country that all that matters is the elections, not changing anything, but the parties that get to operate as companies remind you, hey, you got to buy our product this year. um
You got to
I
donate to the multimillionaires, right? Yeah.
got to do it. Act Blue, baby. Beto is gonna kick. He's gonna kick flip. He's gonna kick flip his way to Congress, baby. And
I
and
love it.
like 2020, there was, so February 2020, like, already knew and had some ideas of, like, had some lyrical concepts, but not necessarily songs for things I wanted to explore. Um, and like lines written, or like, yeah, in some cases lines written, concepts written out. But it February 2020, I think it was, we were having practices, gearing up for shows that, what was supposed to be our first shows, that ended up not happening because of the whole thing. Um,
Yeah.
but two songs, No Problem and If Only, came together, literally, like the structures of them, and I believe the bass melodies for them came together. No Problem, I remember, like, a practice, like we walked in, it did not exist, and we walked out, and basically the song existed. The choruses existed, um, and I think maybe after the following practice, If Only was in a similar place, and that No Problem is a song about marginalization and tokenization, and predominantly white spaces, and kind of reclaiming and asserting, um, your autonomy of definition and empowerment. And If Only is a song that is just a song about realizing you live in a world of just rampant, and in a lot of cases preventable deaths, that grieving, it becomes difficult when you don't know what the fuck to say to people when
Right.
they've lost they've lost a sibling. They've lost, largely to drug overdose, was one of the premises of that song, although throughout the pandemic it took on a different kind of meaning. But we had
Right.
those songs that were very heartfelt, and then COVID happens, everything shuts down, and I had nothing but time to think about things. And all of the with the rampant and the such a widespread, rampant, and preventable death spike that was COVID, all of the inequities that were, all of the desperation that was already there, that got worse, and all the people that for the first time got to be introduced to how close to the cliff you live, even if you think you're doing everything the quote unquote right way, and you have you're working because to contribute to this world, to be of value, you have to work, and all these things, doing things the right way, like how close you actually are. And all of the Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, you know, protests and flashpoints. All those were things that. So I guess this is a long way of saying the vision for doing something was there, and in a grim way, the opportunity arose by virtue of there being nothing. Because like I said, I went from I had just gotten a new job March 9th, the same dumbass job I'm working now. And if any of my coworkers find this, and it's one of the ones that doesn't know that I'm in a band, but you started finding me on LinkedIn, and somehow you're finding out on my social medias, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? I'm the longest tenured person in the department now. So what are you gonna do? But but it's one of those things where I had just gotten the real job right before the 40 hours Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And luckily I was able to keep it because, again, literally March 9th, New York City, office job was my first day in the job. And luckily they had a project for me to work on. So I was kept on, stuck the job. So all I did was open the laptop for 8 hours a day and did data entry basically. So I had time, and my mind uh, had nothing but time to work on song ideas. And it was one of those things where there's a lot of space that's covered on this album lyrically, and I
Mhm.
had a feeling I wanted to, because I know the genre isn't particularly built for, or predominantly engaged with politics. I'd rather, and sometimes I'm not sure if this was the best idea from a business standpoint, but I kind of don't care. Like, and
Yeah.
I don't care, but like earnestly, I think it's better to take in a lot of dense commentary, even if it is wedged into 2.5 minute, uh, 2.5 to 3 minute, like, Blink 182, Alkaline Trio, Taking Back Sunday, Motion City soundtrack type songs. Like, the more the better. I think the more to chew on,
Right.
the better. And having that time, I looked at Jacob, a guitarist, that we a lot of our writing kind of starts as just like guitar, like bouncing vocal melody ideas and/or guitar ideas at each other and seeing
Mhm.
what works. Is like, let's just sit, because we're never gonna have as much time. You never have a chance. You never have multiple chances to do a first album as a band,
Right.
and you will never have more time. The logistical, like, a nuisance that is being in a band and having to juggle your own schedule within context of this thing, and this thing is uh, three to sometimes like six other people's uh, schedules. Like, we'll never have as much time to just devote to creating something. And we're trying to do something that's
Absolutely.
kind of like unique, or it's a fusion of a bunch of different, not sounds, but a sound, like trying to take a very dense thing and fit it into a very kind of, um, not constrained is the wrong word, but like compact uh,
Yeah, yeah.
thing.
You're right. You're not writing like 6 minute long epilogues to like, do
Yeah.
this massive storytelling project on these songs. These songs are still very much like pop punk emo band length songs conventionally, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um and I really do. I that's and you say it's not a good business, which like you just said, and I'll reiterate, like, who, like, in a certain sense, you don't give a fuck about the business angle if it's something you really care about talking about. But also, to be frank, from a business standpoint, this also does make your band a little more unique than the next emo or pop punk band, right? Like, as much as like talking explicitly about politics can be polarizing, which fuck them, whatever. But like, uh, the fact that you're talking about that in a genre like you just said yourself is otherwise, either talking about more like personal relationship stuff, or maybe they're doing a little bit of storytelling, or they're doing angsty boy whatever shit, like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
it, it, it does kind of create your own lane in a way, right? So even from that standpoint, I know that's not what you were thinking about, but like, from my perspective, it makes you stick out a little bit more, and it in some ways it might get you some other, eyes on you, like mine or my friends I was talking about, that otherwise maybe wouldn't have gotten on there, right? So
Yeah,
there
for
there is
sure.
that to be said with it, right? Thanks for going over all of that. I really appreciate it. Like, it does make a lot of sense, both from you working at a branch of the ACLU, which that's fucking cool. That's great. Although I'm sure it was very taxing, emotionally. Uh, doing that. Getting started with this band and kind of having a lot of time during lockdown times, during pandemic times, during kind of a remote data entry job or whatever else it might be, to really reflect on these things. Because I looking at this full length record, I was looking through some of the lyrics again today before we were going to do this. And, to say that you cover a lot of topics is an understatement. I think, um, there's 10 songs, and I would
Yeah,
say that you cover more social issues than some bands that are even kind of politically charged do in couple albums. Like every song kind of hits a different perspective or a different facet or a different topic. Like you said, things going on in the world, obviously during the pandemic, or during that year with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the election, you know, bureaucratical political bullshit, like the whole 9 yards. Those things all like it's tough to fit a lot of that even into a full length record. And I think you guys did a good job of really kind of talking about these things in a way that is you know very current for what's going on in the world, but also like very, I don't know, like it's not like you lost anything in the melodies or you lost anything in the songwriting process, right? It's still very much like a great sounding emo pop punk record. It just happens to be on way heavier topics than the next band over, right?
for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, it has to be like it was one of those things. Like there's almost a I've joked occasionally being like, well, ha- I have to really nail this because if it comes off lame, this is gonna feel like schoolhouse punk rock, and
I gotcha. Yeah.
that's gonna like so it was like a lot of having to be kind of and like be pretty self-critical in terms of like really vetting um these songs like to the uh Eminem 8 Mile listening to headphones on the bus type of like scribbling. No, actually, like seeing, making sure that the cadence, like, okay, what do I want to say? Like, it got a constant state of like, what do you want to say? Writing it out, trying to see if singing it, if there's a natural way to sing it that works, that fits with the music, that enhances the feeling of the music, and being like, oh no, that word's too big, or that word like you don't need to use. It doesn't need to be framed. Is there a better way to frame this that makes sense in the totality of keeping the song moving?
Right.
Because once and you know it as a listener, right? I am a one of the joys of being an idiot singer that can't play an instrument is I hear all music in the writing process as a listener. And it's a
Right.
lot of so there's a lot of toying and chiming in on dynamic as we're writing parts or something, shifting or playing around with different instrumentally dynamic changes if I think that it kind of helps open up a better pocket cadence wise for the vocals because you once you're zoning out of a song, you've zoned out of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's just like one of those things. Like, let me what holds my attention and makes this the most fun for me to sing throughout this. Uh, that
Absolutely.
still feels like impactful, and that's kind of the and also just to touch on what you said before, it's like I felt that actually like it behooved us, I guess, quote unquote, like the long term of the band to let's really construct a lot to say because we know not a lot of bands are in our spaces are commentary oriented. Let's just fully embrace it because like one, it's that much more to draw from, and two, I feel like it is there is such a there's such a self-conscious aspect uh to releasing music publicly and having music that exists publicly, um mixed with how you use the word the or the phrase before that, like it's sometimes it's taboo or controversial to talk about politics and music, and I think it's sometimes not even necessarily controversial in like a hey man, who are you to say that. Sometimes it's a oh all right cool man, and then like rolls your eyes and like
Yeah.
move on to
Hmm.
something. And for me it's like, you know what, let's quadruple down on it because that essentially then forms a complete like identity, id- uh, like a identity card ethos for the band. Here is
Mhm.
what we are about, and what we do, not just what we sound like. And here it's out, and from that, having a confidence that you took your time to not just write one song, not you write a song about, from a place of like model minority myth, like breaking, to songs about like modern segregation, to police brutality, to just like absolute activist burnout, and like,
Mhm.
what is the point of what is the point of trying to get people to try anything when people seem to be checking out, or are happy
Yeah.
to are happy to have their buoys on how far they'll go, pretty close to shore, as far as how far they're willing to dig deep and dive deep into anything. Like
Well,
now,
there's
yeah.
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, I yeah, just finish. Is that like I there was a concern that I felt, like, because it did feel heavy writing about these things, that if I put one song out, and if it either didn't get super responded to, and all this other stuff, that I would have, or it got shit on or something, like, as much as I'd like to say I'll push through, fuck them,
Yeah.
I'm in my 30s, man. I'm like, I don't need to be yelling at the comment section all
Mhm.
day, and like,
Right, right.
and I didn't want to get discouraged, and because I believe in this, but I also, like, yeah, I didn't want to, potentially risk getting discouraged at like too early. I wanted to have this album exist to
Mhm.
say all of these things in these spaces.
Absolutely. And I get, like, especially, you talking about all these different topics, and you talk about even like activist burnout. Um, like there is a bit, I forget which song it was, because I was listening through and I'm terrible with song titles, but there was one that you were even talking about. It felt like kind of the activist burnout was one of the topics of the songs that you were talking about, and I could see that from someone like yourself. Um, that has worked in these organizations, has worked in activism and stuff like that, and getting a lot of frustration from not only people that are on the wrong side of political issues, but people that you also agree with on the right side. I should say correct, not right, correct side of
Yeah,
political
yeah,
issues.
yeah.
And, and, uh, and kind of you, like you said earlier, I think at the very beginning of the conversation, talking about the, like, posting and commenting on social media is activism, right? Like that's a whole
That's
other side
that
of things that really can burn you
showing
out,
that you're
right?
on the
Like,
right side, showing that you're on the right side of history, and doing nothing to make the present or future better. It's very wishful thinking that things will get, that things will end up in a place where you don't have to think about politics. And that was another key of, like, the name of the album, the theme is that, like, because a lot of people were like listening and learning for the first time, like,
mhm,
this didn't just happen with Trump.
no.
This none of this shit. This didn't just happen with Bush. Like, this is built into the fabric of, most of
And
American
it didn't
history.
just
Period.
right, right. It didn't just happen with Republicans, right? Like that's the other thing that
No.
people really need to reconcile with.
How
I've
many
got
how
I've
many
gotten
homeless
some
how many homeless moms did Kamala Harris, send to jail?
right. How many people got put into prison because of the crime bill that Joe Biden, as a senator, was a huge advocate for and helped co-write, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
um, but when I have said that stuff on social media or on this podcast and clipped it and put it on socials, boy, you'd think I was a far right person for saying that or something
It
like that,
always, yeah,
So,
it always, man, because there's a bunch of people that, like, the parallels between political Twitter, and I'm a big wrestling fan, and wrestling
yeah,
Twitter, where people
uh
will
huh,
just, like, making sure they're going to, don't be a hate, like, hockey Twitter. It's like the way, like, politics has become sport, and on some level, it's always been that, but it's become this, like, nightmare blender of high school movie popularity contest
yep,
meets
debate
sports.
club,
Yeah, debate club
yeah,
sports, wrestling. It's like the way that, like, wait, did you say this? Actually, this guy, and it's like, no. The problem is all these people, like the majority of people on planet Earth, are suffering for a
Yep.
myriad of preventable reasons, like a
Yep.
myriad of like it
Of
is
policy
unconscious
decisions, right? Yeah.
policy decisions and cultural and cultural malaise,
Yeah.
acceptance of status quo, and frankly, like, it's also something that I think about. Um, Somos is a bit. There's two bands I guess I want to shout out as like kind of weaving in broadly, because there's individual aspects that come into the album, but broadly, it's as far as like commentary and headspace. Somos was an awesome
Mhm.
band from Boston. Um, you know, just so many songs that spoke to, like, I think I can't remember what review of one of their albums, or maybe them as a whole, but it kind of talked about how viewing the people that work 9 to 5s less as sellouts and more as people that have been pushed into just like really confining, draining boxes,
Mhm.
and like that's something that was like that view of people and the world impact. It helped my worldview, and it helped my view of how I wanted to speak commentary wise in songs. And proper's songs of just unapologetic commentary from black queer perspective was just so encouraging, in terms of like, all right, I need to write. I need to have the courage to write songs from my lived racial experience, and uh, be willing to bring it into spaces that are not used to it, and maybe even some places that don't, are reluctant to hear it, and to a
Mhm.
internet that is just waiting to find my
Mhm.
address, if they don't like
Yep.
something I said
Yep.
about this country. Uh, so
Boo. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. Um,
yeah, but yeah.
Well, thanks. First, thanks for. That was a question I was going to ask you. You already answered it. If there was any bands that kind of influence you lyrically when it comes to this commentary aspect, because as you said earlier, you're very into the emo pop punk genres, as I have been in the past. But I'm also very into like the hardcore metal, punk heavier scenes where I think like political commentary is a lot more common. It's interesting and good to hear you kind of give those other bands as kind of a shout out of lyrical influence as well. Um, you know, coming from this and talking about this, and I would actually like to you touched on two of the songs, and I'd actually like to go back to one of them because it was one that not only is a great track, but also one you have a music video for, and also I think one that kind of you hit on the nose very much so, an issue that I'm sure a lot of people feel that they don't hear articulated, especially in the alternative scene, which is no problem. Um, I I before we get into that, because I was just kind of curious of this before we get into some of the songs and some of the other things with the band. What got you first started? You talk about you know being in the ACLU, working part time there, kind of being involved in these different aspects from 2016 on. From a young age, what got you both started in music, and also where did you come from to start off with your political and kind of social advocacy views? Where did those kind of stem from for you prior to the band?
So as far as music, one day in 1999, I put on the television and I saw three naked men running around, uh, and I was just like, "What is this sound?" And yeah, Enema of the State, Blink 182, like changed my life. I don't know what I would have gotten into musically, if not for that album. But like that album, and getting to be in elementary school through high school, from late 90s through 2000 through the late 2000s, like it's like the golden age of like, and also growing up where I did. So like you mentioned before, TBS, Brand New, um, Movie Life, those were
Oh yeah.
huge. But like then the internet, the national acts like Newfound Glory and Alkaline Trio. I'm trying to think who are other. I mean, Motion City Soundtrack, and I think Motion City Soundtrack, like, is a very big touchstone for me, because like Blink 182 is like they're my favorite band. The way their songs are so concise, they're so catchy, they're so concise, uh, and
Here's
they're
the here's the real question with Blink. Are you
yeah,
and you like Alkaline Trio, which I'm from the Northern Illinois area, so big
hell
fan of
yeah.
Alkaline Trio for numerous reasons. But are you a fan before you go on? Sorry to cut you off there, but
Oh,
are you a
good.
fan of the Matt Skiba albums as well, or are you a fan of more of the Mark, Tom, and Travis Blink? Like, or are
What
you a fan of all the above?
I mean, it's one of those things where Mark, Tom, and Travis. That's the Trinity. That's
Yeah, that's the holy trinity of pop punk. Yeah,
that is it. That is like they are just it's that's lightning in a bottle. Chemistry of three guys. One guy that could have chemistry with anybody on earth, and two guys that have are self-taught musicians that
Mhm.
like learned how to write songs and like at the same time. And it shows,
Right,
because
right.
when they actually care about writing songs with each other, it there's no meat left on the bone after you
Right.
listen to a song. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
everything was supposed to be. I appreciate the Matt Skiba albums for what they are. I think there are some songs on
Yeah,
there that
yeah.
are good, and I think there are some horribly embarrassing songs. And I think for the
Yes,
most
agreed,
part,
agreed.
I just view it as, Mark
The B Squad.
Mark was just trying to keep the family together. That's what I see. He said, "I'm tired of
Yeah,
you
yeah,
running in
yeah.
it. I'm tired of you running in and out of the house. All right, stay gone. You don't want to stay here. You walk out that door. You don't come back. Okay, you understand?"
Right, right.
And that's what I think happened. And so from that perspective, I'm willing to understand and appreciate them for what they are. Um, but
I have a
that's
I have a weird opinion on Blink where like I think you're right. I think that like Travis and Mark and Tom had something special, despite me thinking Matt Skiba is an objectively better musician than Tom in a lot of ways.
yeah,
Because I don't know if you could see, actually, I've got an Alkaline Trio banner right above me, right
beautiful.
there. So I'm a big Alkaline Trio fan, but
The heart bomb,
um,
baby.
I think that when Matt came in, there was a lot of filler on those albums, and weirdly enough, I think like the best song they made was on like the deluxe edition, I think, of California, the 6/8 songs. You know what I'm talking about? It's
I
like kind of like a
interesting,
heavier
yeah.
one. Like I think that was the best like
Mhm.
Matt era um song, and it was kind of like a B-side, so I don't know, it was like a really weird disjointed thing they did for a couple records that like I don't think anybody believed it was going to last. It was either going to fizzle out or Tom was going to come back, and obviously we know what happened, right?
On some
um
level, it's like
but
functionally IP protection. You know what I mean? Like that
yeah,
that that
yeah.
essentially was what happened there.
It's the
But
equivalent of all those big movie franchises doing sequels that were all right, but no one
to
was sure they
retain the
needed it.
rights,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
retain the
yeah,
rights
yeah.
to the property. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
I think of it like that. Like I think really, because if and if it was approached as like, let's make the best songs we can make, they wouldn't have sound most of those songs wouldn't have existed. Those songs were like this
No.
like super triangulation between like, cool, we're writing songs together, but we also want to like, we basically need to like reheat this band as like an identity, because we had a reunion that functionally wasn't. We had a reunion that was just an extended breakup, like a extended
Yeah.
breaking up thing that
Hmm.
happens. You couldn't even write an album in the same room together. Like that is a
God,
bad
what a
sign.
mess of a band when you really think about it, you know?
Messy, messy situation. But
And
you
now
know,
they're back and bigger than ever, you know? So whatever.
and I'm cautiously optimistic that I will enjoy it, just because the set list was like 95% 1999 to 2003, and I
I,
think
I
that
got to
is
ask
like
you, well, while we're on this, and then we'll continue on. I don't mean to keep talking about Blink for
most
forever,
of
but
this
it's fun.
band's
Um,
vehicles and band practices and hanging out is talking about Blink 182, so it's totally fine.
what was your opinion when the song with Tom coming back, Edging, came out? What did you
Oh,
think of the
yeah.
song?
Oh boy. It is a song that
I
sounds.
might clip this, by the way, so be
It
prepared. You know.
sounds how I think how I think it would sound. I am able to find peace in it if it is like the teaser. If I think of the song less as a song and more as a teaser trailer, like as an extension of the announcement that Tom is back, because it just like I don't I don't think that Mark and Tom, if you see this, Travis, please put us on. I think it's great. I think it sounds like you guys just want to let people know you're a band, and maybe didn't take the longest amount of time to write that one. I hope that didn't take you a lot of time to write. I think time should be spent more on
Well,
making
it was. I
more.
think for me, I was blown away by it because I'm somebody that actually, and then I'll finally stop talking about Blink. But I really loved Neighborhoods, and I actually really loved Dogs Eating Dogs. Like I genuinely thought those were great
Interesting.
recordings. Like some people interesting, but I thought both of those were actually genuinely sound releases. And then I heard Edging, and I was like, I thought when they came back it was gonna blow the Skiba era out of the water, and it did not. you know.
It did not. Yeah, it did not for sure. And part of me thinks that like that's part of why I think they wanted to just announced that they were back together, and they just like paint by
Threw something
numbers
out.
a song
Yeah.
about degeneracy and not letting go of it. But it's become a huge song. Like did you see them when they were in
Yeah.
Chicago? I saw videos from
I didn't
Chicago, and
get to
it
see them.
looked
No. No.
nuts. Oh, you didn't.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I
it's
saw
worth
that.
it.
So
It's
the last
worth
time
it.
I saw them in '09 when they had their sort of first reunion back, sort
Yeah,
of, or
better
whatever.
vibes than any of the other ones.
Yeah, and it was incredible. I know some people kind of talk about that they are like hit or miss when it comes to how they actually sound live, even though the energy is amazing.
Yeah,
But those
yeah.
people were wrong when I saw them because they were flawless. And I don't even like I've kind of ebbed and flowed with my Blink love throughout the years. But that was still one of the best concerts I've ever been to because they were like just whatever it was that day, they just fucking nailed it. It was also them, Fall Out Boy, and Panic at the Disco all together on a show, so it was pretty good. But
Yeah.
I digress. So talking talking going back to the original point we were talking about probably 8 minutes ago. Um,
Yeah.
about you're influenced by Blink, you're influenced by Taking Back Sunday. You said Motion City soundtrack. All
The
these different
lyricism for
bands.
sure of Motion City for
Um,
sure.
yeah, I mean, great band when it comes to context, both for songwriting and lyrical content, right? Like, I think they were a band that was underappreciated, or are a band that are underappreciated in a lot of those facets. Um,
I think
when
they changed emo music like in a real in a way of like
y-
actually digging into deep dark stuff rather than just talking about how you're kind of bummed about something.
Either bummed about something or wanted to party or whatever, right? Yeah. So going from there, say you start listening to that, pretty early on, elementary school all through high school. Um, when did you start writing your own music, and when
End of high
did
school. Oh, sorry.
pop and end of high school? Okay, and then when did kind of activism or political consciousness come in for you? Was that prior to that? Was that graduating high school? Where did that come from for you?
So, I as far as like dedicated political like conscientiousness, it's definitely something that like um when you're in high school, you start to develop a person like your personality and some of your kind of value judgments for so like but doesn't feel political then. It just feels like, you're trying to not be an asshole to people and not be a
Right.
bigot. It seems fairly simple, kind of difficult.
Mhm.
Come to find out, very difficult for a lot of people. Um, but as far as like dedicated conscientiousness, it's like it's corny, but like when I went away to, I didn't go away to college. I went to a commuter school. I went to Queens College, and starting to just take like my first semester, just taking like sociology classes and um, urban studies and anthropology classes, and just kind of like trying to become more analytical with like poli sci, trying to become more analytical with people and structures and power. Like starts a little there, but I still, for there still was a lot of just you know college kid shit, like college kid shit talker, where it's just like you're using this. Yes, you are delving into the topics, but you also are kind of using them as a cudgel against people that you already didn't
Yeah.
like. Um,
Yeah.
and I would say like a moment where I was like, I need to be more present. It's like everything else. It's a bit of a journey. Like need to be more like deliberately present. Was Trayvon Martin Trayvon Martin being murdered by George Zimmerman was and the media coverage around it. This
Yeah.
whole like discourse around like, oh, he deserved to be like, he deserved it. Look at this picture of him, and I just remember thinking to myself like, and seeing people that I knew, maybe not well, but knew, go along with that felt weird. And also seeing the silence of a lot of the people around me and in the scene, not really, it felt really weird. And that's where start to kind of engage more. But then and that's kind of where a lot of that's where, like, I guess paying attention to things like media literacy, paying attention
Mhm.
to the dynamics of like of of like police, the inner the and a lot of the protests that happened around that, like the way like because I think around that you also have somewhere in that ballpark. Maybe it's Eric Garner, because that was here in New York. That was another one,
Right.
like similar thing,
Mhm.
similar a discourse around it. The way seeing that there was a slowdown, that the NYPD decided to go on strike because of the criticisms that they were receiving, and it was
Give
it
me a
was
fucking break, man.
give me a
Yeah.
fucking break.
Like
Great advertisement. But like and then that's where it kind of bubbles to a thing where like, I'm paying attention in terms of like I'm reading the articles, and I'm reading the news. But the advocacy really did start with that community organizing fellowship. And as far as like a lot of the anti-imperial stuff, that starts like it starts a little bit in 2016, because that's where some of the organizers that I know now and I'm friends with now in the Philippine American, like the Philippine Solidarity, like human rights space. Uh, I met around 2016, when it was just like, let me engage, especially like with my own, with the causes that affect my ancestral land. And I didn't have the time, because I still was doing the work juggling at that time. But once the pandemic happened and I had more time, everything was Zoom meetings, so it was much easier to attend everything when
right.
I don't have to figure out how I'm gonna get from here to figure out the subway, get like and that's where I started to kind of get involved. And in part, that was encouraged by every time I went to the I've been to the Philippines a lot of times. I am
Okay.
somehow now 34 years old. It sickens me to say that.
Yeah.
But I have been to the Philippines. I want to say, let me think. I want to say at least 6 or 7 times. And
Oh
because
shit.
of how time works, I'm older every time. And I would
Yeah.
say the majority of those, I feel like I'm trying to think. I think like I said, it's been like 6 or 7 times, and I want to say the third or fourth one, I'm uh 19, 19, 20, and that's where like kind of noticing, like kind of just reflecting on, and because before that I'm just there as like 5, 7, and 12. Like it's so I'm not a person. I'm an organism that is being taken to shopping
Yeah.
malls, and I'm being taken to the mall, and I'm being taken to the pool, and that's what's happening. In the arcade.
Right.
That's
Right.
that's what's
Right.
happening, and that's what I'm
Mhm.
thinking about. And that was the first time I went as an adult, and timeline wise, I'm in college, and just thinking about seeing the disrepair and the inequity there, um, both the disparity from how the quality of life in America, and also the disparity and inequity within the country itself, where some
Mhm.
people actually are doing okay in the Philippines, and then you have 3 million homeless people in Manila, and kind of as you get older, you come to then learn about the global South. You get to learn about imperialism. You get to learn about how uh, the wage theft that just is capitalism, the labor
Yep.
export and the brain drain that happens to countries due to that, and the way that then makes makes international countries have trouble, even have trouble, quote unquote, lifting themselves up by the bootstraps, because the deck is so stacked against them,
Mhm.
that like finally, so it's one of those things. Each time I went, it became more and more apparent. And then when I went, with the final time being 2019, I went once during Duterte, and during all the drug killings, and that was getting to ask people about what it was like to live in that, and just the heaviness of how casual you have to live with it to live in it, was
Right.
like so jarring, that uh, I was like, man, once I have some time, I have to, like, I'm barely staying afloat trying to take on the domestic fight,
Right.
the domestic policy fights,
Mhm.
while working 3 jobs, and fall, like, just gaining credit card debt because I have no health insurance, like, from being
Right.
a part
Right.
time worker, even for the
Yeah.
ACLU.
God. Yeah.
Like, it's one of those things where I knew I'd want to jump into it, and thankfully, after, well, it's unfortunate, but making the best of a bad situation, having the time that the pandemic afforded, I was able to get involved with organizations like the New York Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines, and Malaya Movement, and Anak Bayan, all these other, and I'll send you the links to those, but like all these
Yeah.
different,
Yeah. I'll put them in the
because
notes.
and there's a lot of congregations all around the country, and especially Chicago is actually one of our bigger ones. So but yeah, like that was the time to hop in, which then further encouraged, like, fuck yeah, let's make these songs that kind of put these issues more on the table that they're not being
Yeah.
brought to.
Well, and right before we get into a few of these songs, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I could
I'm
talk to you about
fine,
this stuff
man.
all day. Okay, okay, sweet. But you bring up kind of developing these anti-imperialist views and doing a lot of trips to the Philippines. I don't know that there's a better, also from an anti-imperialist standpoint, from looking at the United States, that there's a better place to look at, and in realms of like a place that was at certain points completely decimated by U.S. imperialism, and still in some ways with some of the reactionary fascist parts that can be incendiary in that government, that there's been troubles over the years, um, all tied to the U.S. government and what they wanted to use as a strategic, like geopolitical, like station for naval, for
Naval bases.
naval bases and military infrastructure and all this kind of stuff. Like, not to say that you went there and like that's explicitly what you saw or whatever, but just like the ramifications of that from the 40s or earlier and on. It's that's a real instance. That's not just like somebody reading an article. That's not somebody just like being in the know from being educated on certain independent media outlets or whatever else. That's like really seeing the ramifications of something that's happened, that even quote unquote, some things have been taken away from that or whatever, like that they've tried to espouse, like the damage is done regardless, right? And like you still see ramifications, you still see connections when it comes to the government and some of the problems that occur from that. I know I've at least read up a little bit on that from the past couple of years, where when there was some of the there were some issues going on where like there was a lot of ties to some of the um if it wasn't politicians, some of the quote unquote like deep state, or like, I don't mean deep state as a conspiratorial thing, but
Deep
like the
state.
people in the institutions, the people in the institutions, yeah, the people in the institutions of the Pentagon or whatever else that still have deep ties with the Philippines. And you talk about like the disparity there, right? Like and you talk about domestic issues here. It's so hard to even focus on stuff there when there's already so many problems here. That you look around here and like, the more you read up on it, the more educated you are, the more into activism you are.
And
You
the
can have
connection,
like,
and you find the connections. These things,
yep,
are not happening in a vacuum from each other.
right,
We spend billions of dollars to have these naval bases, to give weapons to the Philippine government, so that we can say that we have a strong ally against China, who is also not a friend of the Philippines at all. Not who is
right,
also not a good human rights model. Um,
right,
but the U.S. isn't saying that because they care about human rights, because not just looking at what happens here, but because those same weapons that they're spending billions of taxpayer money to give the Philippines have been used more on the Filipino people, who are trying to organize, by the Philippine government, um, has been used more on the Filipino people than it ever has been used on our enemy, China. When
uh-huh,
it's one of those things where the thing that the Philippines needs is sovereignty. It's not about
right,
the U.S. Being the best friend there. It's not about China being the best friend there. It's about that country has so many resources in it that that many U.S. corporations and multinational corporations try to steal from, and that you have the land grabbing from the Chinese government. And it, like the Philippines is does not the Philippines needs to be left alone, so that it can organize itself. It can see the riches, and its people can see the riches of those resources. That's the answer. But and all that money that gets spent to have all this devastation happen, that doesn't cease the tension. It only just permeates the tension. Is money that's spent that we don't put towards things like universal health care here, that we don't put
right,
towards housing here, that we don't put towards renewable energy here. So, and that we don't put towards raising the minimum wage. All these things, like these things are not. It's not a vacuum. These things are not unrelated. It's all happening. It's all life.
right,
Like, and it's one of those things that, and I don't think I would have. I think engaging in one, like, or the more I engaged in domestic issues, the more it was impossible for me to ignore the connection of the international picture, because that was like a vacation for me uh,
mhm,
back in 2019 that felt more like just kind of a radicalization trip.
I don't know, Desmond. It sounds an awful lot like socialism, man. You can't say that shit. You know.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Scrap it. I thought about it. I changed my mind.
um, no, I mean it makes a lot of sense though, and it makes sense from both lived experience and the jobs you've had, and just kind of your trajectory, where all these things convalesce, both with your band and with the lyrical content, and also with your activism outside of the band. Um, you already touched on it a bit. I want to dive into at least this song. We could look at maybe one other one. If there's one that we haven't touched on that you'd want to touch on, I'd be open to that as well. But you touched on the song "No Problem," which I think is, it's the single you put out. You've got the music video for it, which I felt like maybe you didn't mean it to be this way, but it felt like at least the beginning of it felt um, like a big what's the word I'm looking for? Like it reminded me of your "So Last Summer," the video from Taking Back
Interesting.
Sunday. Like
Homage.
it,
Homage.
yeah,
Yeah.
like homage is the word I was looking for. I was gonna say montage. I was like, that's not fucking right. Homage.
That English degree came in, baby. Yes.
There you
Yes.
go. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was worth
It
it,
was
Mom.
it was worth it. There we go. Yeah. It felt like an homage, even though it seems like you didn't mean it that way. But it felt like just the beginning of it, like where you guys are performing. It had this similar aesthetic to the "You're So Last Summer," I think is the name of the song from Taking Back Sunday. The one where they have in the music
Flava
video they have
Flav,
Flava
baby.
Flav. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Um,
Long Island Pride.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It felt like it. I don't know. It had that energy. I'm not saying it looked the same, but it had that kind of fun energy of it.
Yeah. It was
Um,
a mix of that, and feeling this for sure. The performance
yeah,
side of
yeah,
feeling
yeah,
this.
yeah. 100%, 100%. But you touched on this song, obviously talking about being, you talk about being someone from a marginalized community that people can, I mean, it's in the lyrics, like you talk about, all you want to hear from me is no problem, kind of like people want you to be the representation of like American exceptionalism in the context of being a marginalized person. Um, but like, goddamn, this song for being, I think it's like less than 2.5 minutes long.
Yeah, it's
Like,
like 225 or 220
yeah,
something in the
yeah,
ballpark.
yeah. I know the video is 2:27, and you know, I'll just read some of the lyrics off here for people that haven't checked it out. You should definitely check it out. You say you look so surprised and you get so offended to hear the word racism and how it's ended our friendship. Defend the killer cop. Demand the kneeling stop. Well, is that ignorance coincidence? Well, I'm not losing shit. And then the whole chorus is about no problem. Like that. Like all people want to hear from you is like, it's great to be here. There's no problem. It's fantastic. Things are fantastic. Love to be an American kind of deal, right? Like this kind
USA,
of like,
A-OK.
right. So we were talking about no problem. Um, you know, Clearly, like I said, with the lyrics that we were reading off, uh, you know, talking a lot about not. I'll maybe be restating a few things here, but that unfortunately, this topic of I'm talking about marginalized groups, talking about minority groups, whether it would be ethnic, whether it would be somebody part of the LGBTQ community, whether it would be whatever marginalized groups you want to throw out or minorities, that not just right wing reactionary groups, which I think is what a lot of people think of as being who would have espoused these ideals. And I think they do probably the most overtly. Um, but it's a problem, I think, across the board. And when it comes to mainstream politics, in the sense of like, a lot of liberal people, when it at least comes to uh, politicians, if not mainstream activist groups, mainstream voter activist groups is what I mean by that, really. Or kind of like what a lot of people would label as base liberals or whatever else. A lot of people have this idea of people are in this country because they wanted to be here because it's the greatest country on earth, and like all these, American exceptionalism, hoorah, kind of
Yes.
shit, right?
Yes,
Um,
sir.
so obviously you talked about you have lived experience obviously from dealing with this. Was there any other events, were there any other conversations with people? What other details can you give me or give the people to talk about the song "No Problem" that a lot of people should check out if you've not checked it out already?
So, the there specifically there's a specific conversation actually that spawns this. it's funny because you went over the first verse before. The second verse contains actual quotes from people.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Contains quotes from people that I knew, from arguments that I had with people, um, that you know were about kind of were about this. I'm trying to pull it up. You think I would know it off the top of my head because I just sang it two back to back shows this weekender that we just did. But it 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 uh, it came from conversations that I had with. There's a specific conversation I had with a friend, a former friend of mine that I used to play hockey with. Makes sense, right? That became and it was 2016 Stanley Cup. I was at a bar watching the game, and these guys that I used to play hockey with, both of which became NYPD cops. Um, they we first were talking about just hockey, which is safe, was always the safe play, uh, and then somehow I guess the election came about. The election talk came about. I assumed foolishly. Imagine. I assumed that Trump and the whole MAGA movement, and all of its overt inherent racism was, going to be deemed gross. No, was not the case. Actually, they were huge Trump guys. Things that were said in that argument, that conversation that turned into an argument. Uh, one was they're very unhappy with me very quickly in that, but there were some bangers in there. One question that was asked was, you know, Obama, everyone talks about how he's the first black president. He's actually not. He's half black. What's the other half? How come they don't talk about it? And I was like, gee, I don't know where to, I'm not sure where to start
Oh
here. I'm not sure where to
yeah.
start. There's a lot that I'm not sure which part of explaining everything to you, every dynamic of everything to you starts. Another was, if Obama's not racist, how come racism came back during his presidency? Again,
Uh,
another. I'm not. I think you're holding this map upside. I think you're holding this map upside down. Uh, it's actually
oh
like that.
my
There,
god.
yeah, I didn't, but I walked, and it was, especially because one of those guys that I thought of as a good friend, and we actually from that night forward had a lot of arguments over, usually over text, sometimes in person, if when I go back and visit my hometown, and he'd run into me at a bar and would insist on talking, and I was like, okay, just letting you know, if we talk about this, I'm going to take you to the mat on everything ideologically. It's not going to be a. I'm not going to. We're not going to do a thing where, yeah, but it's good that we're, what's great about America is that we can disagree with each other. No, we're going to talk about this, and every time that
Such
you
a
try to
cop
pivot,
out. Yeah.
every time you try to cop out, I'm going to not let it pivot. I'm just letting you know that. So eventually we
Yeah.
stopped talking. Um,
Mhm.
but like, that was a very specific. I walked out of that feeling, one, pretty sure that this was not as remote a possibility in 2016 as the polls were saying, and two, didn't matter how the election went. People are much more horrifying, and people interpret reality in very propagandized
Mhm.
ways that I don't know how to deal with, and the indignity that I was met with, kind of spelled out to me the shock that I was met with, that I was saying what I was saying. There were some flashes of this before with some of those other, you know like pre 2016 moments, like Trayvon Martin and Eric Garner. There were arguments. I remember having argument with guy. I remember being on a roller, like an adult men's league hockey team in 2014, 15, getting into arguments about Eric Garner. Um, but but yeah, I remember walking out of that feeling like, oh shit, you must have. How long did you assume that I would not be appalled? Like, not
Yeah.
just how long have you felt this way, but how long have you felt this way? And the shock that you have at me wanting to challenge you on any of these. Um, how what's that say about how you viewed me?
Right.
And and that was kind of alarming and jarring as to what that, and it made me feel like, you know what, you need to be a little bit more assertive um and authoritative about what you believe specifically, so that you don't, because you've operated and grown up in, the punk scene is very white space, hockey space very white
Yeah.
space.
Yep.
The town that I lived in, and maybe we'll get into the other song that we'll get into is informed by this, but the town that I lived in, very white.
Mhm.
You know, you probably in general should be more assertive and authoritative, and when you need to write a song of, like, I that was also one of those points where it's like, you gotta write something. This is hitting you in a way that you need to write about it eventually. It's got to be right. It's got to
Mhm.
be right. But like, you have to write about it, and it felt like, uh, I felt that, and I wanted it to be an anthemic sounding song, because
Mhm.
I wanted it to be a catchy song, that is a song that sticks with people. Thankfully, it's seemingly the first song of ours that's like caught people, so to say, and other songs have started to catch up. But that song being the first one, um, because of its catchiness and the fact that then the lyrics, um, are the things that makes it maybe stay with people. It sticks with people first because the catchiness helps it stick the landing, but the content makes it stay. Um, is important to me, and I wanted to kind of, I definitely wanted to give some love. Specific, I want to try to find a lane where I can speak from my specific place, but leave enough room of interpretation, so that you get too lost in the weeds, not sure how catchy it'll stay if it becomes
Right.
too spoken wordish,
Yep. Mhm.
um and also, if it was so specific about uh Asian American experience or something like that, it would, not that I'm against doing that, and I tried to like stick the landing between, especially having the video be us making vegan ube
Mhm.
cookies. Like, that is like, that kind of signifier. Um, Lorraine and Ethan, are two of the people that are in the audience of that, are people that are from the organizing space. Like the organizing groups, having them be a part of it was key, and but also just from the naming of the song, and that the hook being "No Problem" in context of everything felt important, because of playing off of that kind of, the aspects of being docile or agreeable to a exploitative sense, um
Mhm.
exploited sense. You know, it made me want to the like play off that, because if you know any Filipino people, if you've worked with any of them, you ask them to do anything. Oh, it's no problem, no problem. It's no problem. Oh, no worry, it's no problem. And like, I was like, you know what, Filipino people always say no problem to everything. Like, that's just a phrase that we always say. I find myself saying no problem all the time. I was like, you know what, that's like the pivot kind of hook, and that was kind of my attempt to try to turn the horrible realization of tokenization into a love letter for embracing your identity.
Hey, I love it though. That's even cool that you take something that you view as sort of like a a phrase commonly spoken by Filipino people, and you throw it into the hook of this song all about this topic. That's incredible. That's awesome. Um, Thanks for going over that. I really appreciate it. What I could talk about any of these songs. If you don't want, if you want me to pick, I'll pick one. But is there any other songs off of these 9 others on the track listing that you'd specifically want to go over?
So can we do, you pick one, and if it's not, if the one that you're picking isn't the one that I was going to pick, then we'll do yours and then mine.
Sure. What? Why don't? Okay, so you want me to go first? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
because if it aligns, then that'll be the only one we do. But if not, then we'll got two
So I
songs
think
together.
actually, uh, because again, I was listening through it today, and I was trying to pick through what songs I'd want to go over because I could go over all 10, but we'd be here for 4 hours.
We can do
And
that off
and
off mic, because this has been
yeah,
great. This
yeah,
has been
yeah.
great.
We'll
Thank
have
you.
conversations, whatever. And I'd love to have you on again as you do other releases and all that good stuff. But honestly, like the next track, I remember because I was listening through this the first time after you and I talked, and I actually had Spotify pulled up where it was doing the synced lyrics as I was reading through, and it was the song "It Never Ends" that I thought had a lot of deep and in the weeds in a good way lyrical content, from everything specifically talking about coexist bumper stickers to talking about being, in general, being like that you have to be peaceful, kind of talking about a lot of different topics when, at least from my perspective, sort of talking about in general, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, talking about the kind of struggle between, trying to push for better things in the wake of things like, um, police brutality or just violence in general and oppression, and and this is what I took away from it. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but when people constantly either ostracize those movements, or even, again, a lot of times it can be a liberal group or a conservative group that will talk about that you need to be peaceful, you need to be not violent, you need to be like the the cut in the cloth, love and peace group at all times.
Yeah.
Um, and I loved at least reading through those lyrics and listening to the song, because in my mind, I always love when people say that, in the sense that I hate and despise when people say that, because I actually had a conversation about this with another punk rock band that I talked to a couple weeks ago, where he was talking about, like, no revolution, no betterment has truly come about from, like, just peace and love. Like, that's never happened. And, like, I've always referenced two things with that conversation, where one was a former president, John F. Kennedy, that said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And there was like a comedy group where they were going back and forth, and the guy said, like, I believe in revolution, but not in a violent way. And the other guy said, like, well, then by magic, like
Yes.
that kind of
Yes.
deal.
Yes. I've seen
I
that.
think I think it's from Flight of the Concords from years back. I always love
Yeah,
that quote.
I think
Um,
so. Yeah.
and it's so
Great
perfect,
job.
because it's like people say this shit all the time, and actually, like, very liberal or progressive people will say that all the time. People will talk about that in response to civil rights and the MLK movement, with Martin Luther King, and they'll talk about it as if there was no violence and there was no, like, militant action, and there was like enacting, like, Martin Luther King gave the "I Have a Dream" speech, and then we got to the Civil Rights Act and it was all good. And it's like, that's like rewriting history. Like, that's not what happened
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
all.
Oh,
But it's what a lot of people learn in schools to some degree or another, right? So talk a bit, after all my rambling there,
no,
talk a little
all
bit
good.
about what that song's about, where the inspiration was from there, and just kind of go from there with it.
So it's very much. I mean, a lot of that is on the money. The elevator pitch that I have for this song is that this is a song about the realization that nonviolence is not functional. Is not functional, and kind of the uncertainty of what the fuck do I do now, but I know everything I've been told about the right side of history, and change was just going to come, is not true. It's not.
Right.
It's and what do you do um in a because essentially this is a country that founded on violence and is maintained through violence. Its status quo is maintained through violence. So what do you do? That was kind of the thought, and it was kind of spawned through a lot of just like pit and stomach feelings throughout 2020 and 2021. We recorded summer 2021, late summer 2021 through October 2021. And like a lot of these songs were founded from a pit and stomach feeling that, okay, we're kicking up all these rocks and we're seeing the dirt, and I have a feeling not much is going to change, but right now people are looking at it, and just this feeling of like, all right, right now you do see how vicious this country operates, correct? What it does to maintain itself. Do you really think that's going to change through just setting up your newest link tree link, or or just by donating one time to some bail fund once? Do you really think that? And it frankly also comes from just a distress of I'm just talking. This song itself is just talking, and kind of an acknowledgement of like, I don't I don't know, but within this, I'm starting to not, at least not join the chorus of people saying, "Hey, those Target windows, you're hurting the movement by hurting that mom and pop Target shop." Like, I'm not gonna raise my voice about that shit.
No.
Uh, that's not that is the inevitability. That's the inevitability. That's the there's a line um, in the chorus: "Desperate times breed desperate men, dying for anything different."
Yeah.
Just mockingbirds learning the language of violence. So sing it
Hmm.
back. I guess it never ends. And just like, all right, unless the powers that be, unless the establishment in power decides like, eventually this one of these rocks is going to hit us. Eventually, one of it's going to hit all of us. Um, I think until they decide that, this is just what's going to happen, and I'm not going to concern troll, because
Yep.
when I do that, the people that concern troll are just not willing to put effort in, don't have the capacity to put effort in, are putting more effort into concern trolling rather than actually engaging with any of this stuff. And it's very much like, this is a song. I'm not one of those big history buffs, but this is a song that tried to pack as much history, present, future into this as possible, because like that's where the album title name comes from.
Yeah.
It's where I
Hmm.
say I fear for where we're heading, where we've always been, and
Yep.
that's just. And do we not kind of feel literally right there now? We're about to enter an election year, and we're about to just run. Everything's going to be run back. You're going to have
Yep. We're
Biden
gonna have a
versus Trump.
rerun. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
running it. We're running it back, baby. The worst sequel of all time.
The one that literally no normal person, regardless of ideology, wanted to have happen is gonna happen, right?
It's
Um,
it's yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah, yeah. And I appreciate you going over that, and that's exactly what I thought the song was about in a lot of ways. And what you're talking about there too is, you know, from an anti-imperialist perspective, I'm just bringing this up because it's kind of current events, although it's again something that's been happening for decades outside of the United States, but U.S. backed. If I'm bringing this up and you don't agree on this, it'll be fun to talk about. But with I don't know if you follow Palestinian and Israeli conflicts much, but in recent days, there's been attacks on a refugee camp from the IDF, from the Israeli Defense Force. Um, they've bombed a hospital. They've bombed near hospitals. They've murdered kids. They've done all this. And then when Palestinians take up a rifle and shoot back or throw rocks or whatever else, right? What does the media show? What do even liberal politicians show half the time? Is that that's terrorism, right? And it's like, you know, like what what do you think self defense is? Like, what do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah,
What do you know what I mean? Like, what do you think? And you can bring that back to the United States, and when there's been out and out riots and there's been police stations burned down and people point that out and people will sensationalize that in the news, people will sensationalize that in the media, and you're like, but look at what that police department, look at what those police officers have done to this community for years and years and
yes,
years.
yes.
And you're like, which one is the true oppression and violence, and which one is the self-defense? Or at the very least, to quote MLK, and also Rage Against the Machine kind of did a what am I looking for? Kind of did a play on words with it too, where they say the riot is the rhyme of the unheard, or the riot is the voice of the unheard. Where it's like, when you are beating down people, when you remove government assistance for people that have already lost so much due to oppression for years, when you have people getting killed by police at ridiculous levels in some communities, and then they get mad and finally fight back, like, who is the oppressor? Who is the terrorist? Who is the X, Y, or Z, buzzword you want to throw out there? It's
Yeah.
not the poor people that finally destroyed some property. It's the the state institution that is killing people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So first, quickly, Palestine will be free. Much love to Palestine. There's a lot of solidarity between Philippines and Palestinian organizers.
Mm-hmm.
There, a lot of I know a lot of orgs, a lot of Filipino advocacy orgs went to Nakba. There's a big down in Bay Ridge. There's a big celebration down there. There's like at a lot of our rallies and marches. It's the chant is from Palestine to the Philippines and the U.S. war machine. Like
Mm-hmm.
the solidarity there is real. And to your point about I guess, like, where are you identifying the conflict starting here? It's one of those things where, like, I remember a friend of mine tweeted something during summer 2020. It was just a simple tweet, and he just was like, people bitching about riots. These riots have been going on our whole lives. And like the riot, like the idea that the thing that we're analyzing is this response and not the causation, both short term like perennial, like immediate and perennial catalysts here, is just preposterous. And people will fixate forever on uh, the responses rather than the causes and catalysts. And
Right.
a lot of times they're incentivized to. That's kind of where one of the lines here, hard not to want to give up the choices that they give us, accomplice or target or just disregarded, because you are incentivized to help the machine,
Yep.
or or the machine which goes after people, and usually everybody else is afraid, is thankful to not be under the guise of it, or is too overwhelmed to just not engage with it. Um, but like, that is kind of what this song is about, is that the violence is our existence. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
is and it's, if we want to talk about it, okay, let's talk about all of it, because you know a minimum wage worker probably is the one that actually has to clean up that broken window. That's not great, right? But I don't want that window to be broken, because I don't want the causes that led to that window being broken happen in the fucking first place. I didn't want someone to be murdered in cold blood and it be broadcast for the world to see, and that be the one thing that that be the one time that people actually pay attention because they were forced to, because they were left to live in utter disease,
Right.
on
Right.
on a regular scale.
Hmm.
Even though most people in parts of this world, people just have to live with that outright. Period. Live with that insecurity, that existential insecurity. Like that was a moment where people were having a front seat to just this unmitigated world of loss and violence, and the fact that it runs, frankly, powers that be run on that.
Yeah.
That was a song that very much is about, we want to talk violence, let's talk violence, let's talk the
Hmm.
totality of violence, and until the ones in power end their violence, they're just full scale assault. I'm not rooting for bloodshed, but I've relieved myself of the responsibility to tone police, and
Yeah.
relieved
Yep.
myself from the responsibility to concern troll in a complete and utter bird's eye view as how fucked the status quo, how much fucking unmitigated violence uh, is engineered by the status quo.
Yes. Right. 100%. And to kind of talk about the topic of the album that kind of comes from the song a bit, where we've always been. You talk about these things. We talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. We talk about the George Floyd protests, which a lot of people sometimes still don't realize that was the biggest movement when it comes to on the ground protesting and everything else in this nation's history. It was bigger than the civil rights movement, right? Let's be clear. It was, when it comes to the numbers, the biggest like on the ground mobilization in the United States history. We had no federal legislation really when it came to police accountability. And in fact, the response from Democrats was to get 100,000, I think at least, more police on the ground, more funding, more militarization, right? So this idea of that this is where we've always been, is where in a lot of senses it feels like where we'll always be unless something really changes, is quite palpable. I think I wish it wasn't as on the nose in a lot of ways of
Yeah.
like the accuracy, but it is. You know what I
I
mean?
wish this
Like
shit
it
was not
is.
resonant. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
I wish for a world that is so equitable, and copacetic, that I can do my Microsoft Excel spreadsheets in complete anonymity and peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
No kidding.
alas, here we are, and to your point about the the actual power of that movement, I I can I observed that it did make a difference, and frankly, the threat of violence from the masses did bring observable change locally. Uh, so I was working. I left the ACLU right before, like I said, right before the pandemic, and so many bills that we worked on, in the New York, like that we lobbied the New York legislature over, on police accountability. Very funny, very oxymoron, really. Um,
Right.
uh, that were just that like were so just dead in the water. Every time we lobbied on them, anytime we lobbied on just them, we would get pushback. And anytime we lobbied on a host of bills that included those, sometimes even Democrats would just be like, "That's not. There's no support for it. What else you got?" Type just kind of casual dismissal. Um, so I leave in March 2020. Uh, the ACLU of New York. Uh, the the George Floyd protests happen start in late May 2020, and in I want to say the state legislature ends in June, end of June, and within a month, all of the bills that we lobbied on. I believe all of them involving public misconduct records, uh, public independent independent prosecution when there's a death by police. Uh, uh, all sorts of like accountability bills that were dead in the water passed like that. And that to me was just
Great.
like, oh wow. For years I was lobbying on those. And in a month, because you were unnerved by the amount of how real this shit was going to get for you as a politician, and you had the space to pass it. They had to, like, that to me was like a damn. Okay, no, you don't end there though. The lesson is
Right.
you keep that energy. And yeah, like, so like it was. And it's a bummer though, because it feels so far away now, with how much the
Right.
temperature has changed, which is just the result of you go back to work, which your health insurance relies on.
Hmm.
You are that takes over your existential like concern, pretty much, like for most
Right.
people. So
Hmm.
it's frustrating because I try to hold people accountable for being inactive. That's what that song Thanks for Listening is about. But at the same
Hmm.
time, everyone's fucking I'm burnt out too.
Right.
Everyone's burnt the fuck out by the very nature of what this fucking thing is. So, but like, change is possible, but it's not possible by through just making a good speech and and saying the right thing in some sort of movie Atticus Finch moment. It's
Right.
it's and also Atticus Finch loses his trial. No,
Right. Yeah, I believe so. It's been a while,
so
but I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
like a lot of these examples that we hold as tribute. No, the to me, I'm heartened more by the fact that the one time that politicians were made to feel as uneasy as we do, they actually passed shit, at least on
Right.
local levels. And I mean, I'm not federal. This country is designed for things not to pass federally, because
Right.
they
Right.
established a status quo that worked, and
Hmm.
then you're kind of just doing a tug of war on the margins for the most part,
Right. Right.
because
Yep.
not the New York bills weren't even
100%.
that. You still have horrific, racial policing and
Hmm.
instances of police brutality here, but it's just like there's mechanisms now, which is like, and there's some independence of there is some in, like there is some independence of prosecution, which is a good thing, but it doesn't change the fact that, like, there's still so much that needs to be changed, that the fact that people took their foot off the gas is unnerving. But this song is kind of a testament to, like, look, it's a violent status quo. So I'm not going to hear shit. I'm not going to
Yep.
hear shit about uh, a, the CVS losing some revenue,
Yeah. Poor
when people are
CVS.
fucking starving. When the
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
that stole that is a starving homeless person. I don't know what to
Right.
tell you.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a disparity of outrage there, to say the least. Thanks for going over that again. Fantastic song. Was that the one you wanted to go over? Was there a third one you
If
wanted
we have
to?
time for third,
Yeah,
I just want to make
sure.
sure I also get a little plugs in. But the third song that I want to touch on, I'll try to be concise with it as
Yeah,
possible,
yeah.
and I appreciate. But it's the first song, so it's kind of the
Oh
trio.
yeah.
This is the trio, and the sequencing was kind of deliberately. We wanted the first three songs to really kind of kick you in the face, as far as
Yeah, yeah.
we wanted them to be bops, but we also wanted them, like, commentary, to really lean the fuck in.
Uh-huh.
And the 516 is the area code for Nassau County, the county I grew up in.
Mhm.
And I that song is a song that's about modern and historical segregation, kind of the way segregation just kind of morphs rather than it goes away.
Right. Right.
Um, and that's a song that was kind of born out of literally driving, because the first line is driving through Garden City and Hempstead. Hempstead, Garden City, very, very, very rich, affluent, white uh, town, borders. Hempstead, very black and brown town community, very, very uh, completely deprived of resources or attention. And these towns border each other.
Right.
It's like literal mansions, and then a literal train track, and then just disrepair, like
Mhm.
buildings in disrepair, schools in disrepair, and it's born out of um, when I worked at the ACLU, driving to work, driving through Garden City to Hempstead, where I then would work that job, where I would then hear of all these people that live in um, towns in different, predominantly black and brown towns that were dealing with issues of racial profiling. I'd read the newspaper every day to see different ongoings and um, anything going on that we should be made aware of, and like reading deeply into, like, sometimes it's this town is installing new lights, and it turns out, that's a smart city design, which will also install cameras, which will also install microphones in the, like, and the various civil liberties and civil rights concerns there, like, um
Right.
but like literally driving through and seeing just neighboring disparity, and understanding that the only thing that allows that is the status, is the both political and cultural, and the interconnection of those status quo. um and that for me, having a song because wanting to play with the tropes of hating your town and hating, like,
The pop
all
punk,
this.
yeah, the pop
Yeah,
punk
yeah.
juice right there. Yeah, yeah.
Turning it on its head a bit by being like, I hate this town too, but because it's a fucking monument to racism.
Yeah.
That's what I hate about this. Actually, this is a fucking, like, fucked up Norman Rockwell painting that we're living in right now.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
and I wanted a song that like spoke that just speaks to the observe, and especially, like, Long Island has such rich history of bands, and I love a lot of past and present Long Island bands, but Long Island also is birthplace to Levittown, the kind of the beginnings of suburbia. And when they installed it, they also were rejecting the GI Bill. You were not
Mhm.
allowed to, if you served in World War II, you came back, um, but you were black, you did not get to have that American dream. It had to
Right.
just be. It was just white folks, and we live in the echoes of that. We live
Mhm.
in the echoes of that. So calling out that's not forever ago, that's still now, and being like, all right, we're gonna talk about Long Island. Let's talk about Long Island. And I mean, to the extent where it's not so far ago that, like, the second verse starts driving through Floral Park, a
Mhm.
great place to live. That's the town I grew up in, Floral Park. That's what it's called. And a
Okay.
great place to live is the slogan that's on
Right.
the town sign. There is a friend of mine, some point during the Trump years, pointed out to me. He was like, "Did you know that our school district was one of the last school districts in the country to integrate?" And I said, "No."
Jesus.
And he sent me a New York Times article from 1985, uh,
Oh.
yeah, I'll send you the link. It's when
Yeah,
you read
yeah.
it, and when you read what's being said by parents at school board meetings about not wanting the wrong kids to be coming to school, and not wanting the wrong neighborhoods to be part of the schools. Um, just saying that they're saying that it's just strictly a residency thing, and not anything else. They just want to make sure that the kids who are there are supposed to be there. Um, it it and that's 85. So the kids that were in school for that, the kids I grew up with, my peers, their grandparents were the parents that were rallying against that, and their parents
Were the ones that
are
were in the middle of that
yeah
integration part. It was
are
not
and raised
50,
them
60. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
and
raise them.
raised them
Right,
and
right,
raised them.
right, right.
So it's a
Fucking
song
wild. Yeah.
that's just about like, this is here. This isn't in a textbook. This is here. This is now. This is not the deliberately black and white civil rights photos. Uh,
Right.
this is not. Um, this is not remote. This is now, and and also kind of that's where a bit of the like, if you don't participate in standing against this, you are signing off on its permeance on
Yep.
some level. You are accepting it. At the very least, you're accepting it if you're
Yep.
not fighting against it.
Right.
And so like positing that it's here and kind of putting it on your plate of like, the chorus starts, have you seen enough yet? This isn't new. You know it's there, but also within this song, okay, I'm pointing this out to you, now what?
Right. And I think one, obviously, again, another great topic that you guys cover, like you said, these first three songs, man, it's goes just like head first into a lot of heavy topics. And I think going into the weeds of that a little bit and how specific it is to where you grew up in those various communities, it's good for people to realize. I think a lot of people, when it comes to politics, when it comes to history and all that, they like to look at southern states as the ones that had the problems. They like to look at,
Exactly.
the liberal states. Like I live in Illinois, you live in New York. Like people,
Oh, yeah. Some people feel
people,
Alabama. Some people are really Alabama core here.
yeah, yeah, right. Well, it's like I left work today. If anyone from work hears this, I'm tenured. Have fun getting me in trouble.
Deal
But
with it.
but I left work today. I'm in Northern Illinois. I walk outside of the school, Confederate flag hanging from somebody's house, right? Which, like, the first thought I had in my head was like, what kind of loser flies a Confederate flag in Northern Illinois? Like, who is that for? I don't understand.
It's a
Whatever,
literal
but
loser flag. It's a loser flag.
it's
You
a loser
lost. What
flag,
are you
and you're
talking
not
about?
in the South. Like, you're in the part that fought that. Like, I don't
It's the
even understand. But
opposite.
anyway,
It's the
like
opposite of
it's
like when you're like a like when it's a front runner jersey, like kids had, well, not, it doesn't apply to you, but like when I was growing up, kids having like Bulls jerseys or something. It's like,
yeah,
oh, you're a front runner, or like someone that's not in New England with the Patriots, and it's like,
yep, yep,
this is the opposite. This has no geographical ties to you, and it was a failure.
yeah.
What's the appeal other than
First of all,
you're a
doesn't
racist?
apply to the Bulls. I've got a Bulls flag up there. Okay, it doesn't apply
Yeah.
to the Bulls because they had 6 rings, right? But I do understand
Yeah.
your point. No, but,
Yeah.
but
Because it's a loser. No, because it's not even a winner. My point is, it's not even a winner. It's you're repping a loser that you're not even
yeah, yeah,
geographically
right, right,
tied
right,
to.
right, right. Yeah, I
What
just I
is?
just had to sneak in that the Bulls are the best basketball team of all time. But I
I
digress.
watched. I watched Last Dance. I watched Last Dance for the first time. Absolute banger. Absolute banger.
Amazing, amazing. I actually need to rewatch that because it's so good. I would watch it
It's
again.
beautiful. I just
Not to
watched it for the
derail the
first time.
conversation
Unreal.
there. I didn't mean to derail it there, but
Yeah,
I just had to make sure the most important point was made that the Chicago Bulls are the best basketball team of all time. I
that's
digress.
what this
But
podcast is about.
yeah, whole podcast is about Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and how
Yeah.
they're the greatest basketball team of all time. Right. All right. Thanks again. I'm just kidding, but thanks again for going over that. I really appreciate your time. This has been fantastic. I think this will be the longest episode I've done, but I think every single moment of it has been substantive. So I appreciate it. I think this has been fantastic. I really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time. Again, anyone that has not checked it out, which a lot of my listeners are not from the New York area, so hopefully this will get a few more eyes on your record. definitely check out Where We've Always Been. There's a music video out for No Problem. The band has a whole collection of songs on here that I don't think there's a single filler track. So make sure to check out each
Thank
song.
you.
I've got 2 last questions for you. One is a
Mm-hmm.
fun one that
Mm-hmm.
I say half people like, half people hate, but it seems like a lot of people hate it. But I'm gonna put you on the spot with it,
Ooh,
and then
that's
I'll have
fun.
you just plug your plugs and give me the
Plug,
song to
plug,
play at
plug.
the end. But so the question I ask people at the end of every podcast is: imagine you could either say it's for career day, or you could say you're doing a new band, don't have the other members. You can add any other person into your band, living or dead. So it's a fantasy league band lineup. Okay.
Interesting. DH. It's kind of like a
So
DH slash like a trade deadline pickup situation here.
yeah, but there's no cap, right?
No
There's
cap.
no cap space, right? So
Hmm.
so who would you put in your band? Drummer, guitarist, bass player, keyboardist, theremin player, whatever. And yeah, just label off who you would want in like your dream fantasy league band.
I think. I think I would. I'm curious if this would be a who's going to control the rock situation, but I feel like uh, I mentioned them before. I feel like Justin Pierre from Motion City Soundtrack joining the band would be huge because it'd be another guitar and singing. Headspace wise, like that's the better. That's the Rings in the Room type move. You
Yeah,
know what
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean? You know what I mean?
Uh
That's
huh.
the veteran. He's old. I saw that he. I know he's had much love to him. I know he's had a rocky road health wise
Hmm.
last couple of years. I saw friends of mine that went to see him at a Jason Fest. He was performing while he was using he wasn't playing guitar. He just had a cane and he was kind of walking around. Looked very Dr. House esque, which very cool
Uh huh.
style points. But that would be. He's done it. He's been there. Stylistically he gets it, and he also has the
Yeah.
veteran experience to
Yeah.
lead us there. Because that's who. That's like when the Heat got Shaq. Kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
vibes.
100%.
That's or LeBron going to the Lakers
Right.
this time, or I
Right.
guess the Cavaliers too.
Or the Heat.
We're yeah, really, yeah. Anytime he did a betraying situation, yeah. Well, not betray, but wasn't betraying in Cleveland, and I guess your mileage may vary on LA,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Right. Right.
that's the guy I go with.
So you've got but who else would fill out the rest of the band?
Oh, this is a fantasy band. Okay,
Yes. Yes.
geez,
Yes.
damn. Okay, okay. So we got him. Actually, I might kick out Justin now. Now that I know what it
Okay.
is. Sorry, Justin. It's just that you're gonna want to write lyrics. I'm gonna want to write lyrics. I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
going to Josh Kane. I'm going to Josh Kane from Motion City Soundtrack.
Okay.
Uh, I'm going, and this is also just so that none of my bandmates get mad at me. Alternate universe. None of you were born.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
100%.
Let's get
Has
that
no
out there.
bearing on your bandmates and how much you
Yes.
love them and all that. It's just for fun. Yeah. Yeah.
I think. I think. I think I would go. I feel like. See, it's like I kind of want to say Haley Williams just because she's an amazing vocalist, but like, then what am I gonna do? Then.
Co-vocalist. There you
But
go.
it's
You can be
called. Come on,
co-vocalist.
that's where it starts to seem like it's like the Detroiters episode. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
you watched
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Detroiters, where it's Sam and Tim and they're singing on a track and they're like, something's wrong with this track, and it's Sam's a good singer and Tim isn't. At that point, I don't want to be in the studio and I would be the Tim in that situation. So I don't know. Maybe we'll
All
put
right.
it up.
Let me help you out with this then for a sec. All right. We'll get back to whether or not Haley Williams can be in it, but you've got your guitar player. You could have another guitar player if you want, but who's your bass player?
My bass player. Who's the this is oh, you know what? Maybe Ian from Newfound Glory.
There you go.
He's got the belly. We got the
Yeah.
belly. we got the vibes. We got the Hawaiian
Yeah.
shirts with the belly. You know,
Yeah,
it's
that's
classic.
a hell of a vibe live. There you go.
That's a
Yeah,
vibe.
classic, classic.
That's a strong fourth line. Like that's a strong fourth liner. You know what I
Well,
mean?
so far
That's a energy guy.
you've got guitars from Motion City Soundtrack, bass player from Newfound Glory, hell of legendary people to pick for the genre. What about the drummer?
Okay, the drummer. The drummer. I think I'm gonna go with um, Elijah from Proper.
Okay.
They're awesome, awesome dude, great player, uh, and just like the just endless weaving, kind of like this weaving between discourse about music as music to then music as commentary to then just
Right.
those commentary parts
What
because
100%.
he also works for OK Player. He's a journalist
Oh
for
yeah,
OK
yeah, yeah,
Player.
yeah.
So
Well,
so
that's
like
awesome.
so like that like would be really fun. And I guess you know what? Because I'm assuming Haley can play guitar as well. It's guitar and vocals, and she sings the hard parts. We write
There you go.
songs,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
she sings the hard parts, and I get to do Adam Lazare and Mike Swings when what
Yeah, there
to
you go.
when
There
the
you
going
go.
gets tough, when the notes get really difficult. That's where I offload the labor.
So we've got a super group involving Newfound Glory, Motion City Soundtrack, Proper, Paramore, and Career Day. I absolutely love it. It rips. It
Yeah,
rips. And
yeah,
you know
yeah.
what? It's nice because that's again, sometimes I do this with people and they'll pick people from all these different genres in it, and you're kind of like, it's the good musicians. I don't know what the hell you'd play, but this one you could pretty much essentially still write the music you're making and just have
Something in the
these different
ballpark. You
people's
know what? It's
spins
like
on it. Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
the way
yeah.
like LS Dunes, everybody in LS Dunes,
Yeah.
that's
Yep. Yep.
that's like a band where like all of those
What a band.
bands.
Yeah.
It's a great band and it makes sense, but and because it makes sense, like all those people, any of their bands writing songs that borrowed from one of the guys in the other in the other groups that are part of LS Dunes, it makes some sense. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
Or their
100%.
bands touring
I,
together makes sense.
it does. It does, and it works great. Great picks. One again. Last questions here. Thanks for your time. Just list where people can find you, find the band, find anything you want to plug, and just tell me the song you want to play at the end of this.
Sure. I think so. Thank you for your time. Thank you for like when I saw, oh, this is a podcast that's about punk rock and politics. Oh, okay, literally the album that we just wrote. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Uh
Right. Right.
I was like perfect. Uh so you can find us all our socials wherever the hell exists. If anybody hearing this likes us, thank you, and has a Blue Sky invite, please send it to me. That seems like
Same.
the one that might work. Threads just happened last night, like late last
Yep.
night. Like
Yep.
in
I was one
one
of
in my
the
like
first people on it for some reason. I don't know why, but
and
I
I was
was.
so I don't know, but everyone's complaining about it. People are seeing people
It's
complain
stupid.
about it and very Lemming style joining it
Yeah.
anyway. And then even though they
Yep.
found out that if they delete it, they have to delete their Instagram. Like I don't.
I
What
just learned
anyway?
that right now.
At at Career Day NY. Oh, you just found that out? Me telling you?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
God
yeah. You're
damn it.
you're
Yeah.
you're locked in, baby. Zuck, Zuck, Zuck,
Sick.
Zuck, Zuck.
Zuck.
Zuck. But like, yeah. So at Career Day NY, that's our Instagram, that's our Twitter. On Twitter, my personal's private, but if you want to follow it, it's at Goldmember182. I used to have a different handle, but my account was nuked because a friend of mine said, "Hey, you need to listen to this podcast that has Jamie Eat World interviewed on it." And as a joke, which you can't do anymore, free speech is gone. Apparently, you can't say, "Hey, buddy, tell me what to do one more time, and I'll kill you." Sometimes that gets your account
I,
completely fried.
I gotta tell you, on not to sidetrack here, but on Facebook twice in a specific music group I'm in, I would get into these conversations with people and we'd debate on an album or something. And one of my favorite albums is A Thousand Suns by Linkin Park, which a lot of people don't like, but I
Mhm.
absolutely love. And I got into it with this guy that I'm cool with. He's a super nice guy. We were just kind of jokingly getting into it, and I jokingly said, I think I had a couple drinks when I said this, but I jokingly said, if you keep bashing this album, I will light you on fire. And I got kicked off Facebook so fast, it was
Yep. Yeah,
ridiculous. You know?
they don't. January 6th took away a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, yeah, it
That
really
was the
did. It
day.
really did.
That was the end. I mean, we were already in the tank there, but you really couldn't be loose with your language.
Can't tell people I'm going to be an arson on their body anymore. I don't know what this
It's
is.
not
You know,
fair.
the
What
woke
happened?
mob
What happened?
attacks
The
again.
woke
You know?
mob,
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, at Career Day NY is where you can find us on social media. As far as plugs, and TikTok, which I'm gonna have to start learning how to use.
You and me both.
It's
Yeah.
it's difficult, especially with trying to condense all of this into like in a way on TikTok that doesn't like you know. I'm fine with being like making light of myself or how serious sometimes things are, but I don't.
hmm
There's a line, there's like I kind
Yeah.
of it's kind of hard to maintain that uh, cachet that maintain a comfortable level of respect with how TikTok seems to just be making funny faces and making funny faces and being so like aren't I so clever and ironic type of like winking at the
Right.
Bugs Bunny chewing on a carrot, aren't I a sucker type shit like so I have to figure that out because we are going on our first tour um, and
Hell yeah.
and and uh, and we will be it's just a mini run, but that's what day jobs allow for. Out to the
Right.
Midwest,
Oh,
Chicago
nice.
will be part of it. Hoping to, not sure when this drops, but we should be announcing it probably mid July. It'll be end of August.
This will be out after that, so you can plug it now. Yeah. Yeah. No
Cool,
worries.
cool. So yeah, we are gonna be in Phil, just outside Philly, South Jersey, just outside Philly, Pittsburgh, somewhere in Ohio. That's the last holdout. Uh, and Chicago. We might have an off day, but we're probably gonna we might fill that off day with Indiana, but we are leaning towards just having a day to explore Chicago, the wonderful city of Chicago, very wrestling
Agreed.
oriented city. But
Where?
yeah, so
What venue are you at in Chicago? And what's the date?
it is August 29th.
Oh, okay.
August 29th. Definitively August 29th, Kitchen 17.
Oh, nice, nice. Hell yeah. All right. Hell yeah. That'll be
So
awesome. If I can make it, I think I should be able to make it. I don't know what day of the week that is, but I should be able to head out there. That'll be great.
it's a
Sweet.
Tuesday. It's a
Um,
Tuesday.
I'll
If you
find
can
time
make
for it.
it,
Again,
it'll
I'm
be it's the
tenured. You know.
closest show
Yeah.
we'll be playing you for a little bit. So if you
Oh
can make
yeah,
it
yeah.
out.
I try to make it to these. I've got what's great about this podcast is how much I've gotten in connection with kind of up and coming bands, and whenever they're coming in town, I'm trying to make sure to have my schedule free to come out and see them because it's like otherwise I'm kind of I'm out of the live music scene a lot, so it's good to kind of do this to get back into it with some bands that are up and coming. So I'll make sure to try to make it out. So again, make sure to check out Career Day NY, right, on all socials.
Correct,
And
correct.
last thing, what song are we playing at the end of this for the people?
So, and to be clear, there are some love songs and personal songs on there. Shout out to my fiance. Shout out to my family. Shout out to my friends who put up with me. Um, but in the spirit of this pod, the next I think charged up political song is "Party's Over." That one also could
Yep.
use some more listens. Definitely a song about that's just explicitly about no, all the bass line like yeah fuck Trump is done because that guy's gone and the shit's the same.
Right. Fuck yeah. Yeah. That's great message and a great song. Absolutely love that song. I forgot to mention that one as well. We could have talked about that one, but I'm not going to have us go 2.5 hours in here. We can talk about that another time or whenever you release new music. So again, we're going to put on Parties Over at the end of this on YouTube. It'll be the link at the end of this to go to after the video. If you're listening on Spotify, it'll be on right after this. And again, Desmond, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it, man.